For 15 agonizing years, my family saw me as the broken branch of our family tree, the one who simply couldn't survive in the real world. Standing in that packed courthouse hallway, watching my older sister smirk like the verdict was already framed on her wall, something inside me quietly, permanently shifted. I was done being the invisible disappointment everyone stepped over. My entire life had been lived in the shadow of my sister Celeste. 7 years older, razor-sharp, immaculately polished, and absolutely convinced that the sun rose specifically for her benefit. She had blazed through law school and made partner at a prestigious Manhattan firm before her 38th birthday. At every family dinner, our parents recited her achievements like evening prayers. Meanwhile, I was their cautionary tale. The cautionary tale, because I had walked away from college during my very first semester. My mother blamed my sensitivity. My father barely bothered to disguise his contempt. Celeste had a habit of patting my shoulder and murmuring that the world needed assistance too. Not everyone was built for greatness. They never once thought to ask what I had done with myself after that initial stumble. So I let them keep their comfortable assumptions and got quietly, deliberately to work. I went back to school at night. I finished my degree without fanfare, sat the bar exam in a neighboring state, and passed on my first attempt. I built a career in legal ethics, specifically investigating the kind of misconduct that hides behind expensive suits and polished billing statements. My position at the state attorney general's office meant I spent my days tracing patterns of fraud, pulling threads until entire systems unraveled. It was quiet work, important work, and I was exceptionally good at it. 3 years ago, Celeste's name appeared in an official complaint on my desk. Padded billing hours. A client overcharged by tens of thousands. The first complaint was dismissed. Then a second arrived. Then a third. This one supported by a chain of damning emails and to recorded phone calls. A formal investigation was opened. I watched the evidence accumulate from a careful distance and said nothing to anyone. Then, 6 months ago, our grandmother Eleanor passed away. She left her estate to be divided equally between us, a simple, loving act of fairness. Celeste received the news like a personal insult. 2 weeks after the funeral, she filed suit to have the will rewritten, claiming I was mentally unfit to manage my own inheritance. She wanted full control of my share, clearly expecting me to collapse under the pressure of her legal machinery. On Tuesday morning, the hearing opened in a courtroom full of Celeste's colleagues and associates. She had clearly expected me to arrive alone and rattled. Instead, I walked in beside my attorney, a formidably calm man named Daniel Marsh, and took my seat without a tremor. Judge Patricia Holloway settled into her chair and skimmed the pleadings while Celeste's legal team arranged themselves with the casual confidence of people who had already celebrated. Their first witness was a distant cousin named Roger, who testified that grandmother Eleanor had been confused and disoriented during the holiday season. Barely lucid, he suggested, barely herself. Daniel cross-examined him with unhurried precision. Within 5 minutes, Roger had admitted, visibly flustered, that Eleanor had simply been ill with influenza that week. Their opening argument began quietly crumbling. Their next witness was a neighbor who characterized my regular visits to Eleanor as suspicious and manipulative. Daniel walked her, step by careful step, through the timeline of those visits, every single week for 8 consecutive years. Years before any will was ever written or discussed. By the time he finished, the witness looked as though she wished she had stayed home. During the lunch recess, Celeste found me in the hallway. She leaned close, dropped her voice to something meant to sound generous, and offered to settle. She would serve as my trustee, she said. She would manage a monthly allowance for me. It was truly, she assured me, for my own good. I looked at her steadily and asked whether that was the same advice she had been giving her corporate clients. Her expression went cold. She told me I would never understand real law. Daniel appeared at my shoulder, murmuring that it was time to head back inside, and I turned and walked away from her without another word. The afternoon session brought their financial expert to the stand. He attempted to frame my modest, careful spending as evidence of an erratic and unreliable mind. Daniel let him speak at length, let him build his case brick by brick, and then asked a single question. Had I ever missed a payment, defaulted on a loan, or faced any negative financial action of any kind? The expert hesitated. Then he admitted, quietly, that my financial record was completely spotless. Judge Holloway stared at Celeste's table with an expression that had grown noticeably colder. Desperate to recover, Celeste's lead attorney produced a sworn affidavit from another relative, alleging that I had poisoned Eleanor against Celeste by lying about her indifference over the years. Daniel rose immediately and called me to the stand as a rebuttal witness. I took the oath. I described my visits, the shared books, the slow afternoons in Eleanor's garden, the particular way she laughed at old movies. I testified that we had discussed the will only once, briefly, when Eleanor told me that fairness was the only legacy she wanted to leave. Daniel then asked me to state my current occupation for the record. A hush settled over the courtroom. I stated clearly that I was a senior ethics investigator for the state Attorney General's office and a sitting member of the Attorney Disciplinary Review Board. Celeste's face went the color of old paper. Daniel asked whether I had encountered Celeste in my professional capacity in connection with any ongoing matter. Celeste was on her feet. Before he finished the sentence, objecting loudly, Judge Holloway overruled her without hesitation and told me to answer. I testified that Celeste was currently the active subject of a formal investigation into systematic billing fraud and undisclosed conflicts of interest. Daniel produced a limited disclosure authorization signed by the board chair, confirming that Celeste's own professional standing was under serious scrutiny. Judge Holloway looked at Celeste for a long, quiet moment. Then she observed, in a measured voice, that it was a remarkable thing, a woman seeking to control her sister's finances while her own professional conduct was under investigation for fraud. I set my phone on the table. With Eleanor's full knowledge and consent, I had recorded our visits over the final 2 years of her life. The audio was clear and unhurried. To women talking about books, about weather, about old memories. There was not a single word about money, not a whisper of manipulation. Judge Holloway dismissed the case with prejudice. Celeste was ordered to pay all legal fees. The fraudulent affidavit was referred directly to the State Bar for criminal review. As the courtroom emptied, my parents made their way toward me, my mother's eyes wet, my father's face stripped of its usual certainty, both of them looking at me as though seeing a stranger wearing their daughter's face. Celeste caught my sleeve near the door. She said, almost quietly, that she hadn't known about my career. I told her she hadn't lost because of my career. She had lost because she chose to lie. Outside, the afternoon sun was warm and unhurried. Daniel shook my hand and smiled, and I stood on the courthouse steps feeling something I hadn't felt in years. A deep, uncomplicated stillness. My phone buzzed. A message from my colleague. Formal charges confirmed. Filing tomorrow morning. For the first time in my life, I stood completely outside Celeste's shadow. It turned out the shadow had never been as solid as I believed. I had simply never thought to step sideways. As for your question at the end, Your parents have spent 15 years building a story about who each of their daughters was. Tomorrow, one of those daughters will be formally charged, and the other will have just dismantled their entire narrative in open court. That kind of reckoning tends to arrive slowly, then all at once.